is Steve Hubbard, and this is Lesson 2, Module 1 of the Experiential Learning Seminar. Today we're going to talk about the experiential learning process. We're going to focus on Kolb's experiential learning, and then later in the other modules, we're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy, and then Gardner's multiple intelligences. But first, for this module, I want to talk about what is experiential learning. Here we have the definition of experiential learning. First and foremost, experiential learning involves the direct participation or an observation of an event. I got this first part of the definition from your Kale book, or the book Earn College Credit for What You Know. Now, what's important here is to have direct experience, direct participation in an event. Now, this can come in many ways. It can be an activity that you're involved with. It can be an adventure that you've had, an endeavor, an outing maybe, or a trip that you may have taken. Even a lecture can be an experience. Of course, you're having an experience right now listening to my lecture on experiential learning. Conducting a reading may be an experience. It may be that you in your work have had a seminar or a workshop or a project that you needed to accomplish. So basically, any sort of reference point in your life is an experience, as long as you are actively participating in that experience. It's not hearing about the experience and listening and then saying, well, I was part of that experience. No, it's being active in that experience. And that's an important part of the definition of experiential learning. The second part of the definition is that there needs to be reflection involved in experiential learning. Some examples of reflective activities include writing something down, or writing your concepts or ideas or reflections. We often think about about reflections, such as writing a journal, being a good way of learning and being reflective on an experience. But reflection comes in other ways as well. It can be a discussion that you've had with a friend or with a group of friends. Reflection can also be drawing things out, or maybe mapping it out, or classifying something of your experiences, or organizing thoughts or ideas from your experiences, or creating a simulation or reenacting the experience is a form of reflection. There's also visualizations that you can create with your experiences. So when we talk about reflection, we normally talk about it in terms of writing it out and writing it through. But I do want to stress that reflection comes from other ways as well. It can be through discussion or drawing or something visually or musically that you create. Some more ideas about experiential learning. The idea and concept of experiential learning comes from Dr. Daniel Kolb. Dr. Kolb is a professor of organizational behavior in the Weatherhead School of Management. He received his bachelor's from Knox College and his master's and doctorate degree from Harvard University. Kolb was influenced by the cognitive theorists of Piaget, Dewey, and Levine. What a cognitive theorist is someone who learns on how people learn, basically, or what are their knowledge or thought processes are. He wrote the groundbreaking book Experiential Learning in 1984, and it's an important book that we use often in education, and this course is sort of developed based on his book. There are some assumptions that we have about experiential learning. First is that learning is best conceived as a process, and not so much as outcomes. Now it's going to be a little bit different because we're going to be talking a lot about outcomes in this course, but taking this course, I think you'll find, is in many ways a process of learning, of reflecting on experiences and learning from those experiences, and learning from those reflections as well. Also, learning is a continuous process. In the next slide, I'll kind of give you an example of the learning that happens as a continual process. Also, learning requires a resolution and a conflict that often happens that are dialectically opposed modes of adapting in the world. And this often happens both because you're interacting with the environment and then also learning internally. Those two things are often opposed to each other. That's often where the learning occurs. You learn from your interactions from the environment, but you also learn by reflecting internally from that experience that you've had. And that's sort of opposites, both outer world versus inner world. And then also learning is a transaction between the person and the environment. So again, like I mentioned before, both our interaction with the environment has a learning component as well as what we think about the learning experience internally. Here's an outline of Kolb's experiential learning model. And we're going to start with the top box, the concrete experience, which is in purple. So, as I mentioned before, it's important to have an active role in the experience, to learn from the experience. You can't learn about it from someone else, you have to learn it by actively involved, and that's for experiential learning. So the next component is sort of a reflective observation. So after a concrete experience, to maximize the learning potential of that experience, reflection needs to happen. And again, we talked about what reflection can be. Most of the time, reflection can be writing it out in a journal, which is great, a great way to learn. But it can also be, as we mentioned, discussion or drawing or something you create musically or a reenactment or something like that, where you are thinking back on the experience and thinking the components of the experience that you've had. The next process after reflective observation is abstract conceptualization. Now, as the name mentions, it is very abstract to talk about abstract conceptualization. But this is something that happens internally. Once you reflect on an experience, then something happens internally where you make associations of that experiences with previous experiences and other things that you have learned. So this happens internally and is more of an abstract way of learning, where you take the reflections that you've had and internally process them to develop a deeper understanding, because you're associating it with previous experiences and other things that you have learned and sort of making theories. This is where you develop your own concepts, your own theories of understanding an idea or something, or a learning objective. After you have internally processed that information, then you begin to make some active experimentation to test to see, is your idea, is your thoughts or your concepts true in the real world? And then once you made those active experimentations, then you're back to a concrete experience again. And the process goes through and starts all over again. I'll give you an example. So Kolb made this example of a child sort of testing a hot pot of water or a boiling pot of water. You probably experienced this yourself as a child. You may have seen a pot of boiling water on the stove, and you may have gone over there and thought, well, that's kind of exciting, a boiling pot of water. Maybe I'll try to touch it to get a better understanding of what is a boiling pot of water? Why does it bubble like this? And so you touch the pot of water, even though your parents have told you many times not to touch the pot of water when it's boiling, but you go ahead and touch it and you burn yourself. Of course, you instantly have sort of reflective observation from that. You sort of think about, wow, I touched a boiling pot of water and it hurts. And this is what it feels like to hurt. I have a feeling, an association of what it feels like when my hand or my finger is burned. After sort of that reflective observation, you begin to make abstract conceptualizations, sort of theories about boiling pots of water. So if I touch something that is boiling, my theory is that I will get burned. So that happens internally. And then the next and fourth stage is to maybe active experiment on how close can I go and touch that boiling pot of water before I get burned? How close can I get to being able to touch that pot before physically I become burned? So that's an active experimentation, and then it goes back to a concrete experience and reflective observation, and the process starts all over again. Another maybe more funny way to think about this, and I use this often in my classes when I talk about learning theory, is going on a date, an active experimentation of going on a date. So going on a date is a concrete experience, of course, and after your date, you instantly probably have a reflective observation by calling a friend or talking to a friend afterwards about the experience of going on a date, or you write it down in your journal, or you think about it internally, meditate on the experience. And then after you reflect on the experience, begin to make internal or abstract conceptualizations. Can I go on a date again with this person? Should I talk to this person? Should I call this person again? Is this a relationship that will build on each other? And you develop that sort of ideas and theories about the relationship. And then the next step would be active experimentation. Do you want to go and call the person again? Do you want to go send the person an email, a text message, or something else to see how well will they reciprocate and understand that they would like to go on a date as well again? And the whole process starts again. And it sort of goes through the whole process of experiential learning. So we have an activity for you to understand further about experiential learning. And what I'd like you to do in this activity is to have a piece of paper, and you can do this electronically through a Word document, or you can write it out on your own piece of paper and scan it in. But you have to electronically upload it to the NYU classes website in the Dropbox area. So on a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle of the paper or create two columns in a Word document. And on the left-hand side, I would like you to write down the steps of something you recently learned or experienced. And just write down the steps that it took that you went through in that experience. And then on the right side, I would like you to write down your thoughts, feelings, and ideas that were happening internally during the experience, sort of your reflections of what happened during the experience. I'm going to give you an example. So last night I cooked a grilled cheese sandwich, and in the next slide I'm going to go through the steps that I took in creating that grilled cheese sandwich and the reflections I had in creating that grilled cheese sandwich. Of course, this grilled cheese sandwich looks really good. I hate to say that's not a picture of my grilled cheese sandwich. It didn't turn out that great because that looks like a very good grilled cheese sandwich. So here's my example for the activity, the experiential learning activity that I would like you to create. So I wrote down 12 steps in cooking a grilled cheese sandwich. And of course, you can see from this left-hand side, I outlined sort of the details of cooking a grilled cheese sandwich, everything from finding the bread, the cheese, making the sandwich, finding the butter, heating the pan, and all the process that goes through in cooking a grilled cheese sandwich. On the right-hand side, though, I provide a little bit more detail about my thoughts and what's going through my mind and reflections on creating a grilled cheese sandwich. Of course, I start with, should I use white or wheat bread? I often think that a good grilled cheese sandwich uses white bread, although wheat bread is much healthier. And then, should I use cheddar or Swiss? I'm more of a classic grilled cheese person, so I like to use cheddar. And then how much cheese should I use? And how hot should the pan be? And kind of where I went and what decisions I made in creating a grilled cheese sandwich. So you can use this. I will also have this as a resource for this class that you can go back to use just as an example for you to write your own activity. So it doesn't have to be a grilled cheese sandwich, of course, but something else that you've done, that you've learned through, and the steps you took to do that, and then the reflections that happened, both during and afterwards, in that activity. Okay, have fun with the activity, and we'll see you for the next module.